The day my son handed me a brochure for a retirement community, he was smiling. Not the kind of smile that says I love you, and I want the best for you. The kind that says this problem is almost solved. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same table I had bought, in the house I had quietly kept running for 9 years, and I smiled back. I told him I'd think about it. What I didn't tell him was that I had already been thinking, just not about what he assumed. 3 weeks later, when the mortgage payment didn't go through and the water bill arrived with a red past due stamp, my son stopped smiling. My daughter-in-law stopped asking about the brochure, and my daughter, who had laughed when I said I needed a change, called me 4 times in one afternoon. None of them were laughing anymore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the thing about stories like mine. The ending makes sense only if you understand how quietly the beginning unraveled. My name is Winifred Opal Marsh. I'm 64 years old. And for most of my adult life, I believed that loving your family meant making yourself smaller so they could grow larger. I believed that sacrifice was its own reward. I believed that one day, the people I loved most would look around and finally see the hands that held everything together. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I learned. Eventually, I learned. My husband, Gerald, I always called him Jerry, passed away 11 years ago from a heart attack at 58. It was sudden. It was devastating. And it left me alone in a 4-bedroom house in Knoxville, Tennessee, with a paid-off mortgage, a modest life insurance payout, a freelance bookkeeping business I had built over 15 years, and 2 adult children who didn't know what to do with their grief, so they brought it to me. I didn't mind, at first. That's what mothers do. You absorb. My son, Nathan, was 31 when Jerry died. He had a good job in logistics, but his marriage to his wife, Courtney, was already showing cracks. They had a daughter, my granddaughter Lily. Not the same Lily from any story you've heard before. This was my Lily, with Jerry's eyes and her mother's stubbornness. Nathan and Courtney were renting a townhouse 20 minutes from me, barely making it work financially, arguing about money every other week. My daughter, Serena, was 28. She was between jobs, between apartments, between everything. She moved back in with me for what she called just a few months. 14 months later, she was still in the guest room, and I had stopped counting. I told myself it was temporary. Families go through seasons. This was just winter. What I didn't see was that I was the one generating all the heat. Serena eventually moved out and found her footing. She got a job in medical billing, married a quiet man named Theodore Brask. I always liked Theo. He was one of those people who notices when your coffee cup is empty, and settled into a small house in Maryville. She seemed happy. She seemed stable. Meanwhile, Nathan and Courtney's marriage collapsed when Lily was 4. The divorce was difficult. Courtney moved to Cincinnati with a new partner, and Lily stayed with Nathan. Nathan, suddenly a single father, called me one Thursday evening and said, "Mom, I don't know how to do this," so I helped. That's where it started, really. Not with a dramatic decision, not with a formal arrangement. Just me helping, the way I always had. I picked Lily up from school on the days Nathan worked late. I cooked dinner twice a week and brought it over in containers. I paid for Lily's dance classes when Nathan said money was tight. I covered a car repair in February when his transmission failed. I called it just helping out. I didn't call it what it actually was, which was underwriting my son's entire life. Here's what none of them knew. My bookkeeping business had grown steadily over those years. I had clients throughout eastern Tennessee, small restaurants, a few medical offices, a regional landscaping company, a couple of independent contractors. Nothing glamorous, but reliable. And because my house was paid off and I lived simply, I had more financial room than anyone around me realized. I wasn't wealthy, but I was careful. And careful, compounded over years, starts to look like something. I never talked about money. Jerry and I had always been private about finances. It was a habit I kept after he died. My children knew I did okay. They did not know what okay actually meant. That gap between what they assumed and what was true. That gap is where everything went wrong. The arrangement with Nathan drifted into something I didn't plan. After a year of helping here and there, he mentioned that his lease was coming up and the landlord was raising the rent. I offered, without thinking too hard about it, to let him and Lily move into my house temporarily. The guest room, and the room next to it, were just sitting empty. Lily could have the one with the yellow curtains she always liked. Nathan could save money and get back on his feet. Just until you're stable, I said. He moved in that April. He never moved out. Let me be careful here, because I don't want to paint Nathan as a villain. He isn't. He's my son, and I love him, and he worked hard and showed up for Lily in the ways that mattered. But there is a particular kind of blindness that settles over people when everything around them is quietly managed, when problems disappear before they become visible, when the refrigerator is always stocked, and the bills are always paid, and the house is always warm. You stop asking where any of it comes from. You start assuming it comes from the air. Nathan was like that, and I let it happen. Within 2 years of him moving in, I was covering utilities, groceries on the weeks he was short, Lily's school supplies, her orthodontist copays, the HOA fee. Yes, I had an AOA, home insurance, and a repair to the roof that cost more than I care to say. Nathan contributed what he could, which was sometimes a few $100s towards shared expenses, and which he described to people as splitting costs with my mom. He genuinely believed that. I know he did, because I never corrected him. I also never corrected Serena, who believed Nathan was handling the household because, as she told a mutual friend once, and the friend told me, Nathan's always been the responsible one. I almost laughed when I heard that. Almost. The moment I remember most clearly, the one I return to when I need to remind myself why I did what I eventually did, happened on a Sunday afternoon in October. Nathan had invited Serena, Theo, and their 2 kids over for lunch. I spent Saturday evening making a chicken casserole, a pot of potato soup, and a peach cobbler from scratch. I set the table Sunday morning before anyone else was awake. I arranged flowers I'd cut from the backyard. When everyone arrived, the house looked like something out of a magazine. Nathan greeted them at the door like he owned the place, which, I suppose, is how it must have felt to him. At some point during lunch, Serena made a comment about the house. She said something like, "This place always feels so put together. Nathan, how do you keep it looking so nice?" Nathan leaned back in his chair and said, "I've got a good system." I was standing at the counter, slicing cobbler. I didn't say a word. I just pressed the knife a little harder than necessary. Later, after everyone left, Nathan watched a football game while I washed the dishes. Lily came into the kitchen and stood next to me, and she dried the plates without being asked. She was 9 years old. She looked up at me and said, "Grandma, do you ever get tired?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Sometimes, sweetheart." She nodded like she understood. Children often do, but the real turning point, the one that cracked something permanently loose, happened the following spring. I had been having some pain in my right hand. Repetitive strain from years of typing. My doctor recommended I reduce my work hours. I mentioned this at dinner one evening, casually. "The way you mention something you assume the people around you will actually hear." Nathan nodded and said, "Yeah, you should take it easy." Serena, who had joined us that evening, said, "Maybe it's time to think about slowing down for real, Mom." And then Courtney, Nathan's ex, who sometimes joined us for Lily's sake and whom I had always treated with kindness despite everything, said, from across the table with complete sincerity, "Would you ever consider one of those 55-plus communities? My aunt loves hers. They do water aerobics and everything." There was a brief silence. Then Nathan pulled out his phone and started looking something up. By the end of the meal, he had found a brochure online and read portions of it aloud. He seemed genuinely excited. Serena seemed relieved. Theo, to his credit, looked at his plate. Nobody asked how I felt. Nobody asked what I wanted. Nobody asked what would happen to the house, or to Lily's school schedule, or to the 9 years of invisible architecture that was holding all of their lives in place. They just discussed, pleasantly, and at length, where I might go. I smiled. I said I'd think about it. And that night, alone in my room, I made a decision I had been circling for years. I wasn't going to a retirement community, but I was going somewhere. I started quietly, the kind of quiet you learn after 60 years of being the person who absorbs everyone else's noise. I called a real estate agent named Patricia Sundell, a woman I'd done bookkeeping for years earlier, and asked her to help me find a condo. Something manageable. Something mine. I told her not to contact me at the house number. Within 6 weeks, I had found it. A 2-bedroom condo on the 3rd floor of a building in West Knoxville, near a walking trail I had always loved. The kitchen had a window above the sink that looked out onto a small courtyard with a dogwood tree. The first time I walked through, I stood at that window for a long time. Patricia asked if I liked it. I said, I think I've been looking for this for years without knowing it. I signed the lease on a Tuesday afternoon and drove home for dinner like nothing had happened. Over the following weeks, I began moving things quietly. I want to be accurate about what I took. My grandmother's hope chest, which had always been in my room, and which no one had ever once commented on. A box of Jerry's photographs. My own books, my good cast-iron skillet, the quilt from my bed, my coffee maker, and a wooden cardinal that had sat on my kitchen windowsill since 1987. I took what was mine, what was truly mine, not in any legal sense but in the deeper sense, the objects that held my actual life inside them. Everything else I left. I also began carefully and methodically, reviewing every financial account connected to the house. The utility accounts were in my name. The home insurance was in my name. The HOA was in my name. The automatic mortgage payment, yes, there was still a small mortgage, a refinance Jerry had done before he died, came from my account. I had simply continued paying it year after year the way I continued paying everything. Because it needed to be paid, and I was the one who paid things. I made a spreadsheet. I am a bookkeeper. Spreadsheets are how I process the world. The total, when I added it all up, 9 years of expenses, insurance premiums, maintenance, repairs, utility costs, groceries, Lily's incidentals, the roof, the HVAC replacement 3 years ago, was a number that made me sit still for a long time. I did not share this spreadsheet with anyone, not yet. The morning I moved, Nathan was at work. Lily was at school. I had scheduled the moving company for a Wednesday, on purpose, not to be cruel. Because I needed to do this without an audience, without someone standing in the driveway, looking confused and wounded in a way that would make me stop. I had left a note on the kitchen counter. It said, I've moved into a place of my own. I'll call you tonight. Mom. That was it. I drove away at 11:15 in the morning, following the moving truck. I did not look in the rearview mirror more than once. Nathan called at 3 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. I was unpacking the hope chest when Serena called at 3:18. Then, Nathan again at 3:45. I sat on my new couch in my new quiet, and I listened to the voicemails after I had put the cardinal on the kitchen windowsill where it belonged. Nathan's first message, Mom, what is this? Call me. Serena's message, Mom, Nathan called me. Is everything okay? This seems, are you okay? Call me. Nathan's second message. His voice was different this time. Not angry, something more uncertain. Mom, I came home and a lot of stuff is gone. Can you just call me and tell me what's going on? I don't understand. I called him that evening. Hi, Nathan. Mom. A long pause. What happened? I moved into a condo. I told you in the note. But, he stopped. Started again. Why didn't you tell us you were planning this? I'm telling you now. That's not. Mom, this isn't how this works. You can't just. Where is this place? Are you okay? Did something happen? I considered how to answer. I had thought about this conversation for weeks. I'm fine, I said. I found a place I like. I signed a lease, I moved. But the house. What about the house? Silence. I could hear him thinking, working through something he couldn't quite name yet. Lily's still in school here. Her stuff is here. I'm still here. I know, I said. Another pause. So whose? He stopped again, and that was the moment. I could hear it in his voice, the beginning of a question he had never thought to ask before, because he had never needed to. Who's going to take care of things? Nathan, I said gently. How much do you know about the bills for the house? A long silence. What do you mean? The utilities, the insurance, the HOA, the mortgage payment. I pay. He started, then slowed. We've been splitting things. Can you tell me which accounts you have access to? He named one, the internet service which he had set up in his name 2 years ago when he upgraded the router. Just the internet. I let that sit between us. Nathan, I said, I'll send you some information tomorrow. After you've had a chance to look at it, we can talk. He didn't sleep that night. I know because he texted me at 1 a.m., 2:40 a.m., and 4:15 a.m. Not angry texts. Confused ones. The kind a person sends when the ground has shifted and they can't find their footing. I answered in the morning, after coffee, looking out my window at the dogwood tree. I had put together a document. Not to punish him. I want to be clear about that because it matters. I put it together the way I put together everything in my professional life. Accurately, completely, without drama. A record of what I had been paying, month by month, year by year, across the full 9 years Nathan had lived in that house. Utilities, insurance, maintenance, the roof, the HVAC, property taxes, yes, those too. Groceries on the weeks his account ran short, which I had tracked without comment. Lily's orthodontist, her school supplies, the security deposit I had quietly covered when Nathan had almost lost the townhouse before he moved in with me. All of it. I attached 9 years of bank statements, organized by year. I emailed it to Nathan and Serena both, at 8:47 on a Thursday morning. The subject line was, Financial Records, Our Home. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk on the trail behind my building. I didn't check my phone for 2 hours. When I did, there were 14 messages. Nathan called me that afternoon. His voice, when I answered, was the voice of a man I didn't quite recognize. The confidence was gone. What was left was something rawer, something more honest. Mom. Hi. I've been sitting here for 3 hours. I didn't say anything. Mom, he said again. I had no idea. 3 words. Not thank you. Not I'm sorry. Just the simple, stunned admission of a man confronting the full size of something he had never looked at directly. I know, I said. Why didn't you? He stopped. Took a breath. Why didn't you tell us? I had expected this question. I had an answer ready, but when the moment came, a different answer arrived. Would you have asked? Silence. A long one. I don't know, he finally said, and I believed him. That honesty, at least, was real. The mortgage, Mom. His voice had gone quiet. I thought Dad paid that off. He paid most of it. There was a refinance. I've been covering the rest. For how long? 9 years. I heard him exhale, the sound of a long-held assumption leaving the body. Serena called an hour later. Unlike Nathan, she was crying before she said hello. Mom, I didn't know any of this. I swear I didn't. I thought Nathan was. I thought you guys had some kind of arrangement. We did, I said. I just didn't know that I was the only one keeping it. She cried harder. Serena, I'm sorry, she said. I keep thinking about all the times I called you with my problems and I never once. Mom, I never once asked how you were doing. Actually asked. I would say it, like, how are you, and then just start talking about myself. I know, that's horrible. I didn't argue with her. But I also didn't comfort her the way I would have once. I let her sit in it for a moment, not unkindly. Just honestly. Over the next 2 weeks, the practical reality of what I had done settled over the house on Chestnut Ridge Drive, like weather moving in. The first bill to cause real alarm was the homeowner's insurance. A notice came by mail, explaining that the automatic payment had been discontinued and that the policy required an update to the billing account. Nathan, who had never known the policy existed, let alone who paid for it, had no idea what to do. He called me. I don't know who this company even is, he said. It's been the insurer for 11 years, I said. Gary set it up. I've renewed it every year. What do I do? I gave him the company name and the policy number. I told him he would need to contact them and update the billing information to his own account. I told him the annual premium. The silence that followed was the sound of a grown man calculating something he had never had to calculate before. The HOA notice came next, then a past due flag on the property taxes, which were paid biannually and which, until that year, had simply appeared in my calendar as a reminder I handled without discussion. Nathan called a family meeting on a Saturday. Serena and Theo came. I wasn't there. I found out later from Serena how it went. They sat around the kitchen table with printed copies of the financial documents I had sent. Theo, who worked in commercial real estate and understood numbers, apparently went pale when he added up the property tax total alone. He kept saying, "This is not possible," Serena told me. And then he'd look at another page and say it again. At some point, Nathan pushed back from the table and said, "I feel sick, not because of the money." He told me this himself later. Because of what the money represented. 9 years of his mother sitting at a computer in a back bedroom, working until 10 or 11 at night, covering expenses that he assumed were simply covered. 9 years of him buying a newer truck, taking Lily on beach vacations, renovating his bathroom, all while his mother quietly held the floor beneath him. "I thought you were retired," he said, when he called me the following Monday. "I know. I told people you were retired. I know that too. Were you ever going to tell us?" I thought about that, really thought about it. "I don't know," I said honestly. I kept waiting for someone to ask. We never did, no. Another silence. Longer. "Mom," he said, "what would you have done if you'd gotten sick, if the business had slowed down? You were carrying all of this, and we had no idea. What if something had happened to you?" It was the first question he had ever asked about my well-being that had nothing to do with what I could do for him. The first time the question had moved in the right direction. "Something did happen," I said. "My hand." He didn't say anything. "When I told you, at dinner," I said, "about the pain, about needing to slow down, I heard him understand something. I heard the shift in the silence. And we talked about the retirement community." Yes, he didn't respond for a long moment. When he did, his voice was different, quiet and ashamed in a way I hadn't heard from him before. "Mom, I'm sorry." The words were simple. They landed simply. "I know," I said, and I meant it. The adjustment period was not easy. I won't pretend it was. Nathan faced a real financial reckoning, and I watched it unfold from a careful distance, close enough to know what was happening, far enough to let it happen. He called a financial advisor, a woman named Renata Cho, who spent an entire session explaining to him what a household actually costs. He called me afterward sounding slightly dazed. "She said we've been living on an invisible subsidy," he told me. "That's accurate," I said. He sold his truck. Not the one he loved, a different truck. A weekend truck he hadn't needed, but had bought 2 years ago because he could. He put the money toward the insurance catch-up payment and the back taxes. Courtney, in a moment of unexpected grace, offered to take Lily for 6 extra weeks in the summer so Nathan could stabilize. He took her up on it. Serena and Theo quietly picked up some costs as they had been offloading my direction without realizing it. Lily's school supplies, for one. A few irregular expenses I had been absorbing. They didn't announce it. They just did it. Small things. But they added up differently than small things used to. About 2 months after I moved out, I received a text from Lily. She was 12 now. Almost 13. At that age where children are becoming something other than children. And you can see it in how they write. "Grandma, I miss you." And then a minute later, "Also, I think Dad is cooking now." It's not that bad. I laughed out loud in my condo at my kitchen table, in a way I hadn't laughed in a long time. "Come visit me sometime," I wrote back. "I'll teach you how to make the cobbler." "Yes," she replied, in all capitals. Whenever you're ready." 3 Saturdays later, she stood in my kitchen and we made peach cobbler from scratch. She asked me about Jerry, her grandfather, in the way young people ask about people they only half remember. I told her things I had never said out loud to anyone. Small things. The way Jerry used to hum while he read the newspaper. How he called me Winnie when he was teasing, and Opal when he was serious. How he would have handled all of this differently, probably. More directly, more loudly, with less patience and more early intervention. "He sounds like he was pretty different from you," Lily said. "He was," I said. "That's why it worked." She stirred the filling thoughtfully. "Do you think Dad understands now? Like, actually understands?" I considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think he's beginning to," I said. "Understanding doesn't happen all at once. It arrives in pieces." She nodded. She spooned the filling into the dish. She did not waste any. The gathering that I remember most, the one I think about now when someone asks me if I have any regrets, happened the following November, Thanksgiving. Nathan invited everyone to the house on Chestnut Ridge. He cooked the turkey himself. He and Lily had apparently been practicing for 2 months, according to Serena, who had received several anxious text messages from him about brine ratios. I arrived at noon. Nathan met me at the door. He looked older. Not aged, exactly, but settled in a way he hadn't been before. Like he'd been carrying his own weight for a while now and had found his footing under it. He hugged me. A real hug. the unhurried kind. "Thanks for coming," he said. "Of course." Inside, the house smelled like roasting turkey and sage. Lily had made a centerpiece out of dried leaves and small gourds. Theo was helping Serena with something in the kitchen. Nathan's two youngest cousins were chasing each other around the living room. The noise was comfortable, familiar. At some point during the meal, Nathan stood up. He did it quietly, without any announcement, and it took a few seconds for conversation to settle. He looked at me. "I want to say something," he said. The table got quiet. "I've been trying to find the right words for a few months now," he said. "I don't know if I have them yet. But I've learned that waiting for the perfect words is sometimes a way of avoiding the imperfect ones, so." He paused. "Mom, for 9 years, you held this family together in ways none of us saw. We didn't see them because you never asked us to look, and we didn't ask because we were comfortable not knowing." He stopped. His jaw tightened briefly. "That's not an excuse. I know it isn't. I just want you to know that I see it now. All of it. And He exhaled. "I'm ashamed it took losing you from the house to finally open my eyes." I felt something loosen in my chest. Something I had been holding for a long time. "I also want to say," he continued, and now his voice had changed, gotten lighter in spite of itself, "that I have paid every single bill for the past 4 months, and I genuinely don't know how you did it. And I'm sorry I never asked." Serena laughed. Theo raised his glass. Lily smiled at me from across the table. I looked at my son. "Thank you," I said. "That's all I ever needed." The rest of the evening was ordinary, and I mean that in the best possible way. Ordinary in the way Thanksgivings are supposed to be. A little loud, a little warm, the dishes divvied up without anyone having to ask, the leftovers packed without anyone expecting me to stay and clean. When I left, Nathan walked me to my car. We stood in the driveway for a moment under the cold November sky. "You could come back, you know," he said, "if you ever wanted to. The house is big enough." I looked at him. "I know," I said, "but I like where I am." He nodded. He understood. He didn't argue. I drove home to my condo, to my cardinal on the windowsill, and my cobbler recipe on the counter, and my grandmother's hope chest at the foot of my bed. I made a cup of tea. I sat by the window in the quiet, and for the first time in longer than I could easily measure, I wasn't tired. I was simply and completely home.